This is a GCSE presentation looking at the structure of the heart. To get started, name the main parts of blood and the function of each part. You may find the diagram at the bottom of the screen useful in helping you. Pause the presentation now, come up with your answers, and when you're ready you can restart the presentation. So there are four parts of blood. The four parts of blood are the white blood cells, the red blood cells, we've got the platelets and plasma. You need to be able to identify them, and you need to be able to give the functions of each part. Now, if you were not able to remember the functions, I strongly recommend you memorize them before you go any further through this presentation. You can, of course, try and match them up now, so if you want to do that, pause the presentation, and when you're ready, you can restart. In terms of the functions, the white blood cells are involved in the immune system, specifically engulfing and digesting pathogens, as well as the production of antibodies. Red blood cells are involved in the transport of oxygen. Platelets are involved in blood clotting, and plasma transport all other substances around the body except oxygen, and the examples given are CO2 and hormones. In terms of A, B, C, and D, you should be able to identify pictures of different components of blood and what they are. A is a white blood cell because it has a nucleus. B is a red blood cell because it has that biconcave shape, it has that indentation in the middle. C is the liquid that everything's floating in or suspended in, which means it is the plasma, and D is the platelets because it's the bit that's left over and it's the smallest part, and they are parts of cells that are involved in forming clots. So the heart. The heart is an organ, that's the first thing. Remember, organs are collections of tissues, all with one particular job. In this case, the particular job is to pump blood around the body. We refer to the heart as a double circulatory system or a double pump system, and the reason we refer to that is because each side of the heart pumps to a different part. In the left side, and notice left and right on the heart are actually labeled in reverse of what you look at them. So when you look, your right hand is actually next to the left side of the heart and your left hand is next to the right side of the heart. The reason for that is that the heart is actually labeled as if it's inside your chest. And the right side of the heart actually pumps blood to the lungs for gas exchange, whereas the left side of the heart pumps blood around the entire body to all of the different cells in your entire body, including the cells around the heart. To supply the heart with all of the oxygen and glucose it needs, we have what are called coronary arteries. And the coronary arteries are all found around the outside of the heart, and they supply all of the oxygen and all the glucose that the heart cells need in order to carry out respiration. When we have heartbeat, we actually have a group of cells inside the heart that send an electrical impulse out that causes the heart muscle to contract. Those particular group of cells are found on the right atrium, and what we can also do is that we can add in artificial pacemakers through surgery, and those artificial pacemakers send out their own electrical signals which can help correct problems with heart rate. When we're drawing the internal structure of a heart, I'm going to show you a method that you can use to help memorize it. It's particularly useful if you're going to go on to A-level biology because it's extended on when you go through the A-level biology presentation on the heart. Remember that there are 4 blood vessels in the heart, and each of the blood vessels is always connected to the same quarter of the heart. So no matter what diagram you get, the tubes will always connect to the same place. And I'll go back over that in a little bit. So when it comes to identifying the different parts of the heart and identifying the names of the blood vessels, this is how I recommend you do it. If the question comes up on the exam, you find a little bit of space somewhere on the paper, and if necessary ask for extra paper, and you draw a box. You then split the box into 2 halves, and then before you go any further you label them right and left, but remember the heart is labeled in reverse. So you have to make sure you put a big R and a big L so you don't get confused when you're talking about in your answer and give the wrong side of the heart. We then split the box up into four, a top half and a bottom half, and then left and right. We connect a tube to each of the four sections of the heart. Now you can add in the circles and semicircles, but you don't need them for AQA GCSE Biology. If you are continuing on to A-level biology, I strongly recommend that you do put them in and you just think about them and call them valves. We'll come back to that point in a moment. The next thing we have to do is we add arrows to show where blood goes in, the top tubes, and blood leaving the heart through the bottom tubes. We then again identify where the blood is going to and from by adding lungs in the top right and bottom left, and adding body cells to the top left and bottom right. Once we've done that, we need to name the top two halves of the heart, and the top two chambers have the same name insofar as we call them atrium. And we have the right atrium and the left atrium. The bottom half of the heart are both using the same name again, and they're called ventricles. And in the ventricles, again, we have the left and right. Now, earlier I mentioned about the circles and semicircles. You don't need these for GCSE, but should you wish, you're perfectly welcome to memorize them. They are called valves. And if you go through the A-level presentation on the structure of the heart, we'll go into that in much more detail. But just like you find in a normal vein, these valves stop blood moving backwards through the system. Once we've got to this point, we're now in a position where we can start to name the four blood vessels that we've drawn onto our diagram. In order to name the four blood vessels, there are some things that we need to commit to memory. We need to commit the word pulmonary means lung, artery is away from the heart, and vein carries blood into the heart. An artery and away both begin with the letter A, and vein and into both have the word in within them. Once we've done that, we can use that to work out the names of the four blood vessels. Tube number 1 is carrying blood from the lungs. Therefore, we have to use the word pulmonary. It's carrying blood into the heart, so therefore it is a vein, and it is the pulmonary vein. Number 2 again is connected to the lungs, which means we have to use the word pulmonary, but this time it's carrying blood away from the heart. Away from the heart means it's an artery, and we talk about the pulmonary artery. Tube 3 is carrying blood into the heart. That again means it is a vein, only this time it is not carrying blood that has been put through gas exchange at the lungs. And it has a very special name because it is the vein that collects blood from the entire body just before it goes into the heart. And it is called the vena cava. And tube number 4 is the artery on which all the blood leaving the heart to go around all of the cells in our body goes through. And it is a very special name, and it is called the aorta. And you have to be able to name all 4 of those blood vessels, folks, as well as the atrium and the ventricles and the direction that blood flows through. You do not need to know the valves, but you may wish to include that. Now, when you get a diagram in the exam, they can change all sorts of things around. They can make it a diagram, they can make it a picture. It doesn't matter. When they say name a particular tube, name a particular vessel, all you have to do is follow that vessel back to where it starts. Bottom left, bottom right, or is it connected to the top left or connected to the top right? Once you find the bit of the heart that it connects to, you should be able to use the diagram, the little box that you've drawn and labeled up. You should be able to identify which tube it is. Remember, the vena cava attaches to the right atrium, but is the top left of the picture. The pulmonary vein connects to the left atrium, but it's actually the top right of the picture. The pulmonary artery connects to the right ventricle, which is in the left side of the picture, and the aorta is connected to the left ventricle, which is on the right side of the picture. And that's why it's so important to learn the process off by heart that I've given you about drawing the block, split it in half, right and left, label them correctly, and then get your ventricles and atrium, then your tubes. And if you do that in the exam, folks, no matter what question they give you on the structure of the heart, you should get all the marks. Just to give you an idea of how everything fits together in the bigger picture, you can see in the diagram we have the four tubes, the aorta, the vena cava, the pulmonary artery, and the pulmonary lungs. Only this time you can see that the aorta expands out and breaks up into smaller and smaller arteries and supplies every single part of the body with blood. It will actually carry blood to those coronary arteries that we mentioned earlier and supply the heart muscle and the heart cells itself with oxygen and glucose. You can then see that there are several veins all the way across the body, and again they all collect blood up and feed it straight back into eventually tube number 1, which is the vena cava. To start with, which of those numbers 1 through 9 are arteries? Well, the answer is that we have several arteries. Please don't assume that certain colors are arteries. It's not always true. If you look at the pulmonary arteries actually got blue in color. So you have to know that arteries are carrying blood away from the heart, and it's the direction of travel of blood that determines if it's an artery or a vein. In terms of the second question, which numbers of the vein? Take a moment, have a quick look through, see if you can work it out. And the numbers of the veins are as follows. Again, notice that we have one of the veins is actually colored in red, and it is the pulmonary vein just coming from the lungs into the heart. Now the last question is a little bit more tricky. We have capillaries, we know about capillaries, and capillaries often form big giant networks, but where are they on that diagram? Well, they're actually found at each of the organs. So all of those organs has their own little network of capillaries, and depending on what organ we go to, different things are exchanged in those particular capillaries. And to finish off, what I'd like you to do is simply create a little flow diagram, quick as you can, spend no more than 5 minutes on it, describing the journey of a red blood cell as it travels around the body. Get as many science terminologies in as you can. You can even throw in things like the structure of the blood and try and link all of this stuff together into one little piece of paper.